Hello and welcome to the SQL interview challenge problem with me, James from Mathdor Software, and I wanted to drift away from querying and look at a challenge that's geared towards database design and referential integrity and data quality. So the question, without dropping the below existing table and recreating it from scratch, we can't do that. We need to simply add two additional constraints that prevent anyone under the age of 18 being added to the table, and also prevents a termination date accidentally being inserted if it falls before the hire date. Obviously that would be impossible, but in our case some bad data has got through, so we need to alter this table and add some constraints against the age column and the hire date and termination date. So you can see they don't have any of the relevant constraints currently. And then we're going to try and insert the following values in SQL Server Management Studio, but these concepts are broad across all SQL RDBMS. And if we set these constraints correctly, when we try and insert that data, we should receive error messages. So I've got this environment set up. We're just going to use my practice database. I'm going to create a schema called development, and I'm going to drop the table development.employees if it exists. Of course, the table is just employees within the development schema. And that's everything that we saw before. I'll leave the question to the side here on the screen. And it's also important to note that we are going to use the check constraint here. Now, the check constraint checks for a specific condition before allowing data to be inserted into our tables. It must satisfy a Boolean expression, meaning the condition needs to evaluate to true. And I will use Go just to nicely round off my batch statements. So there we go. All we need to do is actually alter the table, specify the table, and add our constraint, name it, in that case legal worker, because we don't want anyone being allowed into our table if they are equal to they need to be equal to or greater than the age of 18. And we're going to do a similar sort of thing with the correct termination date check constraint, but we're going to say that the termination date needs to be greater than the hire date. So fairly simple, but it's a nice way to show with the check constraint we can actually evaluate different columns against each other. It's also important to note at this stage that there's several constraints. We had not null, we have check, default, unique, primary and foreign, and they're a great way to evaluate and enforce data quality. So what we'll do now, we'll try and insert our values in that we discussed earlier. So just a simple name, John Doe, classic. We need an age, so 17. We're going to try and have this generate an error, and you can see the hire date has been put in as the 2nd of January. The termination date is the 2nd of January, which of course is before the hire date. So there we go. We get a first error, which is in regards to our age. So if we change that to 19, that will successfully satisfy our first check constraint. And now it's pointing to the fact that our termination date is after our hire date. Let's modify that so that our termination date correctly falls 2 days after our hire date. And you can see we were able to insert our values. So we'll quickly query this table as we round off with, of course, our employee ID that's auto-generated from our identity column. We've got first name, last name, age, and I will just quickly format the hire date with the Great British Culture so that I get days, months, and years separated by a /. And I'll do the same for termination date. We'll just need to copy and paste that format function there, and we can specify that it's coming from our development.employees table. Get rid of the comma, and when we execute this, you will see it's employee ID 3 because I've already practiced this, so there were 2 before, but everything's correct. John Doe, age of 19, so it satisfies our age constraint, and so does the hire date. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you.